How you doing, folks? You're watching Live with Onrie, and I'm your host, Onrie Compen. Great to be here with you guys tonight. I've got a great guest in the house. This is a creator that I met at Emerald City Comic Con a couple years ago. We were stationed right across from each other, and he was next to two other very ambitious creators, and this trio over here were just totally killing it at the show. And he had this really awesome book that I picked up and read, and I loved it. It was called CLOVIS. And he has since gone on to do a number of successful Kickstarter campaigns. He's constantly pushing the frontier for comics and looking for ways to integrate comics and science together, which is really awesome. Kind of similar to what I've been doing with martial arts in comics and history in comics. So now we got to take on science as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Miles Greb to Live with Honor. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Absolutely. Do us a favor. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Miles Greb, and I'm a Seattle comic creator. I grew up in California, but I moved up here a few years ago to become a writer, and hopefully that's worked out. I have a few different series that I work on. I'm probably most known for After the Gold Rush, which is a return to optimistic science fiction. You can check out some of the covers right here, which follows a scout, and she's the last scientist. That's her right here. And she returns to Earth to find it in a state of wilderness, but it's not a post-apocalyptic story. Something else has happened. So the story is about her trying to figure out what that is and return science to the world. And it's heavily inspired by Carl Sagan, Gene Roddenberry, that kind of belief that science and humanism will make us better in the future. And as mentioned, I also have my series Clovis, which is a complete graphic novel, which is a look at North America 12,000 years ago and some of the first people that lived here. And Zach Hartong did the art with me. And you can see it's pretty fantastic. So those are my two main series, and I'm working on my fantasy book, Puck the Artist, which the full trade will be coming out pretty soon. But the plague has been kind of slowing down production, but we're getting to it.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Puck because I've noticed that you've drawn a lot of influence from, some of the 90s JRPG games that I grew up on and that I really loved, and I was a backer for your campaign, and so I'm super excited about checking out. And honestly, I got to say, I really like your approach to comics because I think that's something that is kind of missing now, is that sense of optimism, and something I think we definitely need, particularly when it comes to science, because I think that just without getting too political.
Sure.
It's something that I think that a lot of people are starting to kind of not understand what information to trust, because everything's kind of coming from one place or another. So I think bringing it back and rooting it in something like, hey, science can actually be used to do good stuff too, and science is used to do good stuff. So why not look at it from that prism rather than saying hey, one day machines are going to come and they're going to take over us and butt fuck us, and
I'm really tired of those stories where our ability to learn and build new things kind of betrays us in the end, because I don't really think that that's often true. I mean, of course there are examples of that. I don't need to tell you them, but most of the time our inventions have really helped us. It's made us live a lot longer. It's made us live happier. I mean, life expectancies just went up drastically thanks to both science and the Industrial Revolution. And I just think it's a shame that we take a lot of these things for granted and don't see the good that they're doing and can do. Big problems of our era, like climate change, aren't going to be solved by lowering consumption. They're going to be solved by new, more powerful technologies. Those are the things that make the world better. And Star Trek used to tell these stories, not of just science and technology, but also humanism, the belief that, it's really up to us to struggle to be good people and to help each other. And it's that push for humanity that makes us better. And I just kind of don't see that in sci-fi much anymore. And it's something that meant a lot to me growing up. So I've tried to put that in all my works.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I think and you're very much rooted in superhero stuff too. I think the one thing that you and I, the greatest commonality you and I have is we're both big Spider-Man fans.
Yeah,
and
I have the Spider-Man PS4.
Yeah, I see it. It's fucking badass. You got a nice wall of graded comics back there.
Yeah,
but kind of taking that genre too. It's now it's what's cool and edgy is for the superhero to not be a good guy anymore. He's now a bad guy, but he thinks he's a good guy, and it's kind of getting kind of tried and it's getting kind of a bit too pessimistic, like
Sure.
you want to see that the hero actually do good and succeed in helping other people, because that's why we root for the heroes.
Plus, it's I don't know, it's inspiring, especially when you're younger, to see people deal with complex moral issues and actually make the right decision. Like, not all moral problems and stories should or will be just simple. Like, not everything's Captain America punching Hitler, where it's like, yeah, sock it to him, right? Obviously. But you want to be able to see people like Spider-Man deal with how is he going to grapple with. He needs to go fight someone who's going to cause harm to people. He has like an emotional commitment to somebody he loves, and then like he needs to get Aunt May her medicine, right? Like, it's just a simple story like that. Like, you really see him struggle with different things, but the end of the day, Peter finds a way to deal with it in the right way. And it's kind of rewarding to see people actually be able to be victorious. I think sometimes we don't know what that looks like in our lives, especially my generation, who a lot of us, went to college and thought we were going to live a bit more profitable, prosperous lives than we've lived, and like people kind of like don't get what the work and struggle can give us. But seeing that it can give us some kind of moral value, I think is powerful. So I think that we shouldn't kill the hero just yet.
I agree with you. Now let's go back for a second, because here's a question I'm really interested in. I ask a lot of my guests this, but I'm particularly interested in asking you this question, because you and I are both Spider-Man fans, and I'm assuming you became a Spider-Man fan at a young age like I did.
Yeah.
So what was your introduction to comics, and what was that aha moment that you were like, okay, this is the field I want to commit myself to?
Yeah, so you may not believe this, but the actual first comic I ever read was Fantastic Four #1.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so this is how this is how it came to be. My grandma bought me this, like, it's essentially the first trade paperback. Has like Stan Lee's hands on a typewriter on the cover, and it's like #1s. It's like the first Turning the Mystery with Thor and Amazing Fantasies 15 and Fantastic Four #1. And so it's like all the #1 intros to some major characters, And the first issue in there was Fantastic Four #1, so that's the first one I ever read. And then I think I read Strange is #1, and then Spider-Man's #1, like in that order. So that was like my introduction to comics. I don't know. I just always liked that there was like this living world that, if you, like, especially back then, when 616 had like more continuity, because it's just so long and big now. But like the idea that like you could put work into the story and you get more out of it, like things could be referenced in issue 200 that like meant something if you read issue 33 or whatever. Like, that feeling seemed really cool to me. It's almost like you unlock new knowledge and new like powers while reading if you have read more. I always thought that was really cool. And I also just like related to Peter Parker a lot, because he's a nerdy guy who like he can be sociable, but he has a lot of things that hold him back and make his life harder, but he also invents web fluid and can do cool flips. I can't do cool flips, but I could maybe do the other things.
I also hear Peter Parker's voice in my head, like typically with everything, and it's always that eternal struggle for sort of like finding the happiness that he seeks, which is kind of like unattainable. But that's the thing that I love about Spider-Man that kind of disappointed me. But the only thing that disappointed me about the movies, because I really liked the last two Spider-Man movies in the sense that I feel like they did a good job handling the villains and
I've not seen them.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. I totally get it. But the thing that and I'm gonna guess is because of the fact that they just basically made him like the second heir to Tony Stark, which I don't agree with.
So I'm not a big MCU fan in general. I don't really want to talk about the MCU that much, but okay. I like comic books, and to me, I just have too much of an emotional connection to Spider-Man. I can deal with them messing stuff up with other people's stories, but I didn't want to see him mess up Peter's story. Just didn't want to do it, so I just didn't watch it.
Did you watch any of the movies?
I've seen every MCU film other than the 2 Spider-Man films.
What about I'm talking about Spider-Man movies. Like, did you see the Sam Raimi movies?
Yeah, I like the Raimi ones. I think Spider-Man 2 is actually pretty darn good. I think it's the best Spider-Man movie, and I think Into the Spider-Verse is probably the second best.
Yeah, they're both really good.
So obviously Into the Spider-Verse is probably a better film. It's more creative than like the second Raimi film, but the second Raimi film nails Peter so well. It's just a good Peter story, and I really like it for that. But those two films I think are the best Spider-Man films. They kind of get what the story is about. That conflict between having like a lot of different causes and things that are important in your life, and them not being able to really fit together, and that struggle of like what's the right way to do it, in terms of like both your identity as a person and like the way that you're going to choose to act on the world to either make it better or worse for yourself. Like those are like kind of the quintessential Spider-Man trade-off stories, and I think both of those films do it well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you that the second Sam Raimi movie really nailed it. And that's the thing that's kind of challenging about it is when you're going in to tell these kinds of stories now, it's really difficult to kind of like I had Travis Gibb on here about a week ago, and he made a really good point. It's like how you're not gonna none of us are going to create the next Spider-Man. It's just it's a done deal because it already exists and it's out there. There's going to be great Spider-Man stories told. I think there's still plenty of stories to be told, but creating your own character and doing something like that, I think is really difficult to do. But what you can do, and what I think we've done essentially is because we were so inspired by Spider-Man in our own ways, is we've kind of like sort of a lot. He lives through us in a lot of ways, like and maybe through characters that you create for other stories. It's like just the essence of Peter Parker.
Yeah, so like Spider-Man, is owned by a big conglomerate now, but really this character was created by Ditko, Lee, and to some extent Kirby. Right, like it's their character, and it was really of that moment in the '60s. The Silver Age '60 characters tapped into some kind of mythology that we wanted that we didn't have. They're like secular gods, pretty much. Right? They're really good for telling like these grandiose, high drama stories of high stakes and ethics that are simple to understand when you're little, and when you're older, you can use them to kind of contextualize things. Like obviously, like Peter Parker fighting a guy who owns a chemical company that wears a mask at night is kind of a silly premise, but there's stuff in there for Peter's life that can still matter to you when you get older. And so that's in that way, Spider-Man's just a part of our mythology, and who owns it and who gets to adapt it or whatever doesn't really matter, because the truth of the mythology is going to continue to speak to us, and it will be in our art and work going forward. Same thing with like Star Wars or anything else, like it doesn't really matter who says what. Those stories are just recontextualizing of the stories that humans been telling ourselves forever, and they have a lot of connection to our culture because a lot of them were created in New York by like young Jewish writers that didn't have a lot of connection to other stuff at the time, and they were able to do this, and it's meant a lot to us. And so Spider-Man I think will always be part of a lot of people's creative voice, and definitely mine.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get into your creative process, because you're doing a lot of, I want to say, pretty complicated things in comics. Like,
all right,
first off, you're bringing science into comics, which is, let's look at science as the average Joe. And if the facts are not just stated, it's boring. But if you get the facts wrong, you're going to be called out on it. So how do you find that balance in the sense that you want to tell an entertaining story, you want to get these ideas across, and at the same time, you want to be factually kind of correct too?
And that's a good question. And the main thing I'd say to that is the thing about what science is it's a method. It's a means of analyzing the universe so we can understand how it likely works, right? It's not a collection of facts and figures. And I think sometimes when it's talked about or presented, it's really just somebody knowing a bunch of information. And that's not really what it is. So I think if you're trying to create like a pro-science comic book and you're just trying to get all the information correct as a means to like say this is what science is, you're probably not going to inspire or teach a lot of people. And then it's just kind of like a fact-checking thing. But the thing like with After the Gold Rush, Scout, she sees things through the culture she grew up in, which, there's no superstition, there's no religion. So she is not aware of those things. So everything she thinks about is kind of in this mindset, this material, humanist, scientific mindset. So telling the story through that perspective, I can make people think about what science is and what it means, and have it not just be like her correcting people, or a bunch of just factual information that we've discovered because of science.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And now, in terms of the actual story itself, because obviously there is a big story. The story is what happened to the world. And, obviously you're saying it's not anything doom and gloom. It's obviously something has happened, but she's on this journey of self-discovery. So how'd you go about creating this character? Why was she your vessel to tell this story?
That's a good question. So when I was first thinking of the story, I said I really wanted to tell a story that was about kind of science being the hero. I was kind of like my main thrust, because like I said, I was tired of all this stuff people were making. And I just had this image of a scientist, not a scientist, but like an astronaut, like just pinned to a tree, with like an arrow through their helmet. And I kind of thought backwards from that, like how we got to that setting and that feeling. Because I kind of like the idea of an astronaut like in the American frontier, like, and kind of that feeling, like what would it be like for someone like with a bunch of scientific knowledge in the future, a bunch of technology that's not aware of kind of the way humans think at the moment or have thought in the past. What would it be like for them to be like kind of out of time? And how would they try to push that time to the present? Like you have like Mark Twain's a Yankee in King Arthur's Court and stuff, where like someone goes back in time and they like wow them with inventions and stuff. But I didn't want to do like that. I wanted to be like, how would you try to reintroduce science to a culture that effectively traded it away? Like there was a decision that like science and technology were dehumanizing us, and people either are not aware of this or are very aware and have kind of propagated this. And how would a person that had a great amount of knowledge and culture be able to change that? But one thing about Scout is like she's pretty young and she's still pretty naive. She has a great amount of knowledge from society, but she didn't gain that knowledge. She grew up in that, right? So it's like she's not the smartest person on earth or the most capable. She's just a normal person from this society, place, and the circumstance. I wanted to do that specifically because I didn't want the people who were basically the antagonists pushing it back against humanism or science and that pushing their like more theological worldview. I didn't want them to seem like foolish or reckless. Like they have their own arguments and their own wisdom. And so it's about the conflict of these two ideas. I think it's no secret what side I land on. But I think that the conversation about the conflict is as important as the conflict itself. So I tried to get all those things into the story. I don't know if that answers your question well, but
no, it absolutely does. Yeah. And here it kind of segues over to, you mentioned very briefly your antagonist. So Scout is, one side of it, trying to find the answers, and then so what's the antagonist?
He shows up in issue 4. I'll show you. Let me see again. His name is Gutenberg, and I can't say too much about him. You can see him right there. And you can see when he meets Scout in issue 4, he was well aware that she might return. And he has a story that he's been planning for, because he has a library with one book for every person. And he gives that person or family a book in order to kind of let the narrative of that kind of control who they are. So he kind of socially engineers people this way. And so he's basically been planning this big storytelling gambit. That's Gutenberg right there, in order to try to get Scout to think a certain way. And I don't really want to like spoil, that whole thing, but it's basically his storytelling and his ability to control people through narratives and the power of storytelling versus a scientific worldview. So that's kind of the major conflict. It's Scout versus Gutenberg, I guess.
That's fucking cool. All right. So after the Gold Rush, is it just one trade, or are you planning it as like a series?
the floppies 1 through 5 are out now. You can get them on my website after the Gold Rush Space if you like. But next month we're actually planning on kickstarting the trade paperback finally, which people have been bugging me about relentlessly for years now. So that'll be issue 1 through 5. We're going to print a real nice trade. We're going to print all the alternate covers, original concept art, and the webtoon, and some cool notes in that book. And if it does really well, we'll make it a hardcover, and there's going to be awesome rewards and stuff. So that'll be going live September 1st. I'm working on that the best I can through these plague days.
Yeah, for sure, man.
But yeah, if you can actually read issue 1 and 2 for free on webtoons if you want. Just type.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Webtoons, and you can check out the beginning of the story and see Scout return to Earth and the conflicts start to rise.
I definitely want to check that out. So, so again, is it just 1 through 5, or is there going to be more after that?
There will be 15 issues in total, which are the story.
Oh.
Issue 1 is like the first arc. You know, it's about her return, her meeting people, and her kind of deciding what her action will be in this moment. And then, the next arc will kind of be the consequences and the play out of her actions. And then the last arc, of course, will be the resolve and the change in the story. That's
really cool. So you got a trilogy plan. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're doing with Yisun Shin.
Awesome.
And I see that you've had a lot of success with Kickstarter. I've actually, you and I had our last campaigns together at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is it was a tough time of the year to be doing crowdfunding just because fall, it's like we're right at that's like that final push. So I what's your take on crowdfunding? Like what how do you make it work for you? Because when I saw you doing this, you were just totally fucking killing it. I mean, I was like, holy shit, I felt like I was trailing behind you by like miles. It felt like you were just
man, I don't know if I do anything particularly well. I've gotten really lucky. I think that people kind of latched onto the idea of After the Gold Rush early, and there wasn't really a story with those kind of themes, at least not in this medium. So I think people just kind of liked it, and I kind of got lucky, really. But I'm really fond of Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general. I think that it's a really good way to democratize creation, because a lot of big companies are buying up the rights to, like I said, a lot of our mythology, basically, like we were talking about before. And, there's a lot of gatekeepers for good and bad in the industry that can decide, if you have power to print, make what you want. But the thing about Kickstarter is it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks about your story other than the people who want to buy it. Like my book is basically an atheist comic, and I don't know if a publisher was going to ever print that. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't. But it's made over $100,000 in $100,000 in sales, and like that's because
that ain't nothing to fuck with, man.
Yes, because people wanted it, and it doesn't matter if an editor agrees with that or not. It just really doesn't. Like you get to make what you want, and that way it's kind of taking back kind of, I don't know, like what capitalism is supposed to be. Like if you work hard, do the thing you want, then there's an audience, you can earn it. And so Kickstarter is really great in that way because, like I said, it really democratizes storytelling, and it lets people be much more creative. I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of books that could have used an editor that go on Kickstarter, but hey, it's a risk that you take.
But you can always hire an editor too. That's the nice thing of the position we're in.
Like Kickstarter is a risk, and it's stressful. It's stressful for me, even though I've done 10 of them. But I get to make the stuff I want to make, and I've been really happy with it. I'm very thankful for it. So,
yeah, that period of doing the campaign itself, that month or however many days that you do these campaigns, it's sort of like pulling the Band-Aid off, and then after that, it's like you get to focus on actually making the book and the fun aspect of telling the story that you really want to tell. And it's interesting. You reminded me of something. I remember in 2014, I don't typically talk about what actually happened, but I feel like enough time has passed now where I can actually discuss it. So back in 2013, I approached Dark Horse, and I talked to Mike Richardson, and he was really interested in publishing Yisun Shin. And we set up a call, and we talked, and it was interesting because he was really excited. And then he postponed the call by a week. And then when I talked to him, he had seemed to have lost even more interest. And then after that, his interest kind of like dwindled off completely. And I didn't know what was wrong. I don't know what. I mean, I thought he was interested, but he was kind of like being dodgy. He didn't want to like give me a straight answer. Well, then I saw him at. I set up a meeting with him at San Diego Comic-Con in 2014, and I sat down with him, and he told me that he didn't like the fact that our book has black. In the inside of our pages have black and aren't white panel borders. We had black panel borders instead, and I was really upset by this. As you can obviously imagine, it's like, this really the reason why you're not going to publish my book?
Sounds pretty dismissive.
It was pretty dismissive. But then a couple months later, I got an email from him, and he said that I had done. He wrote a really nice email, and he was like, "You had done yeoman's work on this, but I just don't know how to sell your book."
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that what happens is publishers they see something and they like it, but they're like, I don't know if I could ever sell it. Like, and that's the thing. I've been reading a shit ton of comics lately because I'm working on my next project right now, and I'm just kind of trying to find a new art style, look for different things. And, like as I'm going through everything, I can't sell every book that I'm reading. Yeah. Even though I'm liking the majority of stuff. Like I just read this really great graphic novel yesterday. It was written by Jeremy Holt. It was about Nirvana, essentially. It was like kind of like not directly Nirvana, but sort of like it was a different band, but you could pretty much tell it was Nirvana. Sure. And it was a great graphic novel. I mean, I just fucking tore through this thing. Now, would I be able to go to a convention and sell hundreds of thousands of copies of this book? I don't think so. Does that mean it's a bad book? No, it doesn't mean it's a bad book. It's a fucking great book. It's an excellent read. I think everybody should buy it. But anybody who's into that, of course, because there's also that market. There's also that kind of thing. And the truth is nobody knows what the next big thing is. I think it's up to us as the creators to really take our stuff out there and put it in the hands of the people. And just like what you're saying, democratize it in the sense that, we can bring communities together. We are building our army essentially by going to conventions, doing crowdfunding campaigns, going to, stores and doing signings. But I don't feel like the direct market approach works as strongly for us. I mean, it can certainly work. It can be supplemental, I believe, but it's not something that it can be like a mainstream thing for us, like it is for Marvel and DC. And I think that's a very beautiful thing because it forces us to get out there and make those connections with our readers.
I've had a similar thing happen with Clovis. It almost got published by two different people. Like they even said they were going to do it, and then it's just at the very end, it just didn't happen. Which is unfortunate because I'd really like to get published, kind of just for my self-esteem. But it's okay because I got to make that book and people liked it. Everyone who's read it's told me they've liked it. Anyone who didn't like it kept their mouth shut. So, it's been fun. I'm happy with that book. Like no one's really wrote a book about that period in American history and human history. And I wanted to do that. And I feel accomplished doing that. And I think Zach's just an amazing artist and I love working with him. And so I guess it doesn't matter if it has a logo from a publisher on it. The fact that I got to make what I wanted and people read it and I could pay some of my bills, then that's good.
Yeah, you are the publisher. You have been published. You just did it yourself. And I think that that's something that is not that there's not enough credit given to that. I mean, like Miles, you have a really good sense of what a comic should look like, and you created it not just once. You've done it with three, with multiple projects now. And I think that there's something to be said about that because you obviously have learned a lot. You've read a lot of comics.
And I read a lot of comics.
and I'm assuming, is that where you kind of like picked up on how to go about storytelling, or how what would you say was sort of like your I don't know, sort of like your guideline or your instruction to kind of like put comics together?
That's an interesting question. So, I mean, for storytelling, On Fairy Stories by Tolkien has really always inspired me on like how to write. Frank Herbert's Dune has kind of inspired me of like how to layer your story. And then for comics, everybody does kind of different stuff. And I've just read so many. I've kind of like remember the books I've saw where I'm like, this really uses the medium well. And I've just tried to do that in all my books. Now, I mean, I'm not the illustrator, and a lot of like the way that is done goes to their credit, not mine. But I always wanted my books to look like they were like professional and could be on a stand. Like this is After the Goldish #1's the first book I ever made. And I think it comes out to be a really nice looking comic. And I didn't want it to be like
absolutely is.
Thank you. Like I didn't want it to be like a zine. No diss against zines. It's a cool culture, but I wanted it to look like something Image would put on the shelf. It was really important to me. So I just did a bunch of research, and there's a couple like talks I went to at ECC, and they helped a bit. But I mean, look, we got the internet, people. There's no excuse not to know something. You can know absolutely anything. Anything. If you don't know how to fix your washer and dryer, there's a YouTube tutorial to do it. Like my buddy, like my best friend in the world, like he's been dealing with depression, and and during this whole plague, he didn't know what to do with himself. He's always wanted to be an illustrator, but he kind of gave up. And I'm like, dude, you gave up because like you couldn't quite draw what you want. It's like spend the next couple months like watching some YouTube videos and practicing, and he finally got the motivation to do it. And he's drawing so much better than he was the last 3 weeks ago, like 3 months ago, just so much better. And it's because like there's just so much information. He can get the kind of teachers he needs to these YouTube illustrator videos to make him draw way better. So if you want to do something, man, you don't need anyone to give you power or permission. Like go on the internet and figure out how to do it. And that's what I did, and that's what my buddy did. And you can do that for anything. If it's coding or plumbing or making a book, really, the resources are out there and they're free. So you can really control your life that way.
Now, you had mentioned that your book has made a 6-figure return for you.
Not all profit.
Not all profit, but yes, like you've sold $100,000 worth of books, and which is no small feat. Now, stupid people don't do that kind of stuff. You got to have some sense of the business aspect of it and publishing and everything. So how did you go about learning that? Was it also sort of like something like where you followed an instruction on YouTube?
I don't know. I think I'm a decent salesman. When I was 16, I worked at Staples, and I sold those printers and shredders. I was pretty good at that. So I don't know, man. Maybe that's just maybe you can learn that from YouTube video. I don't know. I guess honestly though, like I just care like a fucking lot about the things that I make into my stories. Like I don't just make them. Like this is kind of like that's my life's work. That's the thing I care about. It's the thing I think about, and I put that into my story. And so I don't know. I think people maybe want those stories, or maybe they just like believe me when I tell them that like this matters to me, and I think it matters to us, and maybe that makes people want to read it. I can't say for sure there. I don't really know how to tell you how to sell anyone's book, But I think the honest thing is if it's art, if it's something that means something to you, people are going to respond to that most of the time, as long as you can articulate it, because people want genuine stories. I mean, so much art today is made by these giant boardrooms and all these decisions and trade-offs, and like they have a deadline. They have to come out when they come out. My books come out when they're ready. Like, I mean, you can see that production design and the quality of something like Star Wars these days. Like back in the day, they didn't have a solid deadline for when they're going to come out. Like Lucas and the art team would get together and they'd think about it, and it would come out when it came out. Like they had time to make production, and I think that when there's care put into something, people respond to that. So
yeah, it's definitely, and you and I share this sentiment about these new Star Wars movies.
I don't want to ramble there, but just in the concept of how art is made, you can see that like that. If you like the films or don't like the films, clearly there wasn't a story set out, right? So like they were not made to tell a story. They don't have a clear theme that they're trying to tell. It's a product. And sometimes products have good art value to them. It's definitely possible. I mean, there's a lot of things from our youth like Transformers or Thundercats or Marvel Secret Wars. Marvel Secret
Wars.
These are toy ads, and the fact that any of us got any value from them is inconsequential to their creation, but we did, so whatever. But like, so just because something is like a product to make money doesn't mean it can't have value. But my point is, like, especially for an indie creator, if you are trying to sell something, you can't sell it first. You have to make what you want to make first, and then find a way to market it. Like your tagline, how you're going to spin it, and like brand it and everything, that's marketing, and it matters because you got to make money or you can't make your darn book. but like it has to start from an honest place. You can't look at the market and be like, oh, I want to make this because this is popular. You got to make the thing that you want to make the way you want to make it, and then figure out the marketing afterwards.
You know, I couldn't have said it better myself. I totally agree with you. And honestly, you're so right. Like, first you make the product that you want. You get it exactly how you want it, and then once you're happy with that, once you're confident with that, selling it becomes easy.
Yeah.
Because you're now because you're not selling it, you're sharing it.
That's right. Like you want people to read it.
Like you're like the enlightened, you're like that enlightened Bible salesman who's going to tell people about the good word, you know, and spreading the good word. And
I'm not like that. I want to.
Yes, exactly. Well, you know what I mean. Like
I get you.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's like there's that energy that comes in from believing it. And you know, I'm kind of with you on that front, you know, in terms of the there's a fine line with it, right? Because there's the car salesman, which you don't want to be. It's like, you know, hey, now if you act now, I'll put a warranty on your.
Sure.
Would you like to put a warranty on this comic for an extra, you know, $5? But you know, I don't think it can go that far with us, you know, because it's like it's about that genuine thing, and I think our goals are different too when we go to these conventions. It's like we want to get as many people as we can. We don't want to be sitting there talking to the same person for 8 hours straight. You want to be talking.
That happens sometimes.
Oh well, yeah. Sometimes it happens. You know, you get caught up with people. But
I've had people ask me questions about my book for like 45 minutes to an hour, and they don't buy it. I'm like, all right.
Oh, dude, I got some more stories for you, man. It's you know, and we all do. You know, like my buddy Ted Sikora. You know, he tells me, you know, some great stories when someone sits there and they'll be at your table for like a good 20 minutes telling you exactly why they don't read comics anymore. It's like, yeah, you know, I don't read comics anymore because it's just so hard to follow up with them now, you know? And it's like, I used to read Batman back in the 80s. Remember in the 80s when they were doing that one thing and they had this, you know, whole thing? What was the name of that creator? And it's just like, they're just fucking draining your life. They're draining your time, and, you know, and you don't want to be rude and tell them to fuck off, you know, because that's not nice either. And, you know, it's, I've learned some tactics over the years though, to kind of get them to, you know, move along, you know, in a nice way without offending them. But I have offended people before because I'm just like, yeah, sorry, I don't really have time to talk right now. I got to get going. But you learn as you go. I think, you know, and you know, another thing too is I don't think we can always be perfect because we're human, you know, and that's part of that human condition is that we're prone to say stupid shit. Everybody has said something stupid in their life
all the time.
Exactly, and we've offended people. We've done the wrong things. We've been the bad guys of our own stories as well as the good guys of our own stories. We try and be good all the time, and I think that's what makes Peter Parker so relatable, is that when he actually is Peter Parker, he's always fucking up. You know, it's only when he's Spider-Man that he's more or less doing everything right, you know? So I want to get into another area that you and I have in common. You know, the Japanese role-playing games, which had a tremendous, huge influence on me as a comics creator, starting with Suikoden on PlayStation 1. That was like the first, that was my first, you know, take into RPGs. But then obviously Final Fantasy VII came, and that totally changed everything for me. Now, did you play the Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying 7's a watershed moment for the genre. So.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah. What were we saying? Sorry.
Did you play the remake?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And what did you think of the remake?
I liked it quite a bit. So, I mean, I'm an old school Final Fantasy fan. My first one was the first one, you know? So, like, there's kind of like two generations of Western Final Fantasy fans. There's the people that came on through 7, you know, the PlayStation era fans, and then there's the Nintendo era fans. And I think there's sometimes a little conflict because the PlayStation fans kind of dismiss some of the earlier ones. Like, I think for a lot of people who played them all, like 6 tends to be considered the best one, or at least one of the best ones. But for like the 7 perspective people, they didn't play it, so they don't really like give it its dues. So it kind of creates some conflict. But in regards to 7, I thought it was beautiful. I really loved the game. I think it's one of my favorite games I've played in a while. What I really particularly liked about it is when we played Final Fantasy VII back in the day, was obviously really emotional, monumental. You know, a game really hadn't quite been like that before. But one of the things was the plot. There were so many layers and kind of like subtext to it. We just used to argue all the damn time on the internet about it. There's all these forums with stupid fan theories and hypotheses about like, oh, is this person the clone of this person, or is Hojo really Sephiroth's father, or oh, is Sephiroth in controller? Is Genova? What is going on? All this stuff, and I was wondering when we replayed 7 if we were going to be able to kind of get that again because of the way the game ended. We can argue now about what's going on again, so it kind of feels like playing 7 for the first time all over again. So I really enjoyed it, especially because of that.
I want to talk to you about this because I gave up on it.
Interesting.
I did. I gave up the part that got me, and I'll tell you why it pulled me out. Sure. Don't take it. Please don't take it the wrong way. It was the part when Cloud had to dress up as a woman, and right after Don Corneo, threw him into the sewer, and he ended up with Tifa and Aerith down in the sewers. That's when I stopped playing the game. That scene originally in the original game was very funny when Cloud dressed up as a woman. It left something to your imagination, and it was like cool. Or not cool. It was funny. It was a comedic moment. I feel like they didn't hit the mark here. I think it was just like an over the top, like, hey, let's make this scene like, super flamboyant. And it didn't fit Cloud's character in the sense that he was just brooding. I mean, here's this guy who's now the shyest guy in the world. He can't even tell Tifa how he feels, but he's going to go and dance with the guy and let him like feel him up and everything. That felt so off to me. And
one thing, I don't know if you did this part because it's somewhat hard to unlock, but you can go into the Honeybee Inn in the original 7, and Cloud actually does go into this like hot tub scene with a bunch of other guys and like has to kind of like roll around and get out of it, and it's pretty silly. So
I've never done that.
Yeah, it's actually somewhat hard to get into the Honeybee Inn, but some of that stuff is in there. So one of the things about Cloud is like he doesn't know who he is really in the beginning, right? So like his ego is really damaged, and he has like this really kind of like hard, emotionally closed off persona because he thinks he's Zack, basically, right? But he's not even really Zack. He's like half Cloud, half Zack. And as he builds emotional connections to the characters, as he gets closer to Tifa and Aerith being etc., like kind of just helps heal him, right? Because like he's close to like the goodness and like nature power of the story, really, right? And so like Cloud starts to open up. That's why like you see him like towards the end of Midgar in the original game, like at the end, when like there's like, oh, who's the leader? Someone say a line. He goes, all right, let's mosey. Like he's starting to like become more silly towards the end when he's starting to become more Cloud. And so I think it kind of fits with his like slowly opening up. I mean, like, and in this game, like, since there's a bit more emotional stuff, because like he flirts with Jessie more, and like he gets to kind of like have a couple more calm moments with like Tifa than he did in the original game, just because the expansion. I think that it works for his character development because he slowly does this in the original game. Like he gets silly. Like I mean, in a Golden Saucer, when you win a Chocobo race, right? The option's like, do you want Gil or GP? And if you're like GP, and then Cloud's like, yeah, give me GP. So like he like. Cloud starts off as like a brooding character, but slowly through the game, he does get more silly and kind of more open when he gets more in touch with himself. And the first game has to kind of do each arc individually because like there's 3 games that are going to be years apart. So I'll have to tell the story in little parts. So I think it kind of fits for the game. But I mean, if it didn't ring true for you, then that's fair.
Well, I never look at it as, okay, it didn't work for me, so therefore it can't work, period. It obviously worked for you. And I feel like I probably was at the cusp where things were going to get more exciting again. I mean, I know the story very well. And I was so excited about the remake coming out that I downloaded Final Fantasy VII on my iPad and played through, I want to say 2/3 of it, just the original version. And I was really curious to see what they would do to really, build up stuff. And to see how they would build Midgar. And I remember when I just got the game and it's just like, I was playing this pixelated version of it, and now you just see this fully realized Midgar in front of you, and it's like, holy shit.
I think one thing that modern JRPGs in particular have a problem with is so older JRPGs almost use comic paneling because they get to control the perspective that you're looking at the backgrounds at. So they can be up high and to the left, or they can be downward. And that control of perspective really is powerfully artistically, because you can make something seem higher or wider or focus on the point that matters to your story. But now that you can tilt the camera, you basically have a bad director in charge of the game, right? So like the camera is not part of the storytelling anymore in 3D. So that can make the world building harder sometimes. I mean,
that was something that also kind of felt limiting to me. It wasn't just the storytelling. It was the fact that I was like, all right, what did I really achieve in this game? Like, and what was really happening? I mean, it felt like a hack and slash. It didn't feel like a real, like, all right, you get into these epic battles. And the summoning also kind of frustrated me too. Like, the game gets to tell you when you can summon shit. Like, fuck that. Yeah, I'll play the original one. I'll summon whatever the fuck I want when I want it. I will call Knights of the fucking Round on the...
I don't like how they did the summons too much. I mean, summons are kind of a problem in Final Fantasy because they are normally good in the start and bad at the end because they're too slow. They're normally too slow. I don't know.
Like the first 2 times.
I would encourage you to finish the 7 remake, especially the whole when the plate falls on Sector 7 is really powerful and good. I don't know. I would encourage you to finish it.
I should go. I think you're right. I think I should definitely go back and finish it. And it's funny because I was a big Shenmue fan, and I was talking about this yesterday with the guest I had on yesterday. So I invested in the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter.
Sure.
So I was a huge Shenmue fan. And there's not a lot of games that really tackle martial arts and story and put them together. I mean, you got Mortal Kombat and shit, but that's a fighting game.
Yeah, and I mean, those are fantasy martial arts anyway.
Yeah.
I imagine fighting is a lot different when you can shoot energy weapons and stuff, right? It would probably totally change what moves are good.
Yeah, exactly. And, there was a virtual fighter aspect to Shenmue, but there was a much broader story. It was a hero's journey, and it never quite concluded. So, I backed the Kickstarter, and I was so excited that they even were bringing it back. I was really hoping he would finish it after making us wait for 20 years, but apparently he wants to see it through the way he originally envisioned it and make 16 fucking games.
Damn.
So I doubt that'll ever happen. And the third game was a huge disappointment because it didn't really advance the story at all. I mean, like, you went to a small village, you did one thing, and then you went to another village that was slightly bigger than the smaller village and did the same exact thing. And that's it. You don't get any you don't get any answers. You don't find anything. It's a really slow, pull. And it's like, we waited a really long time. You needed to give us payoff for this, and you didn't.
Well, sometimes, man, art is just from its moment, and a lot of times we want to remake and relive things, but you can't.
That's true.
Smells Like Teen Spirit sounds like the early 90s. Nobody could have written it before or after. It wouldn't have meant the same. It wouldn't have sounded the same. You can't go back and remake stuff. Like real art that matters, that speaks to people, that kind of cuts through and silences the room, is of its time, because that's what it's speaking to. And like we will sometimes want to go relive things, and maybe things from a period of time. Like in the 90s, we kind of felt like there was a bit more maybe creative voice and stuff, but we can't get back there. We just can't. So.
And the odd thing is that Shenmue 3, I finished it. I suffered through it because it was like, and my goal was to have it done before the convention season started. I went to one show, and then we had all this shit happen.
Yeah. It sucks, man.
So I was like, all right, fine, I'll fucking finish it now. And then after I finished it, it was weird. I started playing Call of Duty because I bought an Xbox One finally, and I couldn't get through that. I don't know. It was just like, you play one Call of Duty, you played every Call of Duty, And then I picked up Final Fantasy VII, couldn't play through that. Picked up Doom Eternal, couldn't play through that. And so I'm just like, after Doom Eternal, I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. So that's the main reason why I didn't buy Ghost of Tsushima yet, is like, I'm just like,
I wondered why you didn't buy that. I'm like, that's your shit right there, man.
It is my shit. And I'm looking forward to playing that game so much. I just know there's a couple things I know. First off, all right, what's coming out this holiday season? Fuck all. Like what? Avengers, and that's it.
I'm not playing that.
I'm not playing that either, dude. Like unless it gets I think it's cool stellar reviews.
I think it's cool that like Camilla Miss Marvel's in it because she's not in a lot of stuff, but that I don't really care. It doesn't look good. I don't like that they're like half 616, half MCU designs. I don't want to play as Iron Man ever. I hate Iron Man. And I don't know, it just doesn't look good. I love Square Enix, but sorry.
Yeah, it just I can really see that game flopping. Okay, so you got all right, Avengers, whatever. It's a throwaway. Okay. Then you got the PS5 launching. All right. True. I'm not dropping $800 to play as Miles Morales. You're on it. Huh?
I always buy the Sony console. I think buying consoles at launch is a good investment because you normally have them for 5 or 6 years, and spending like $500, $600 on a console that you're gonna play like
$600.
We don't know. We do not know how much it is.
Oh, okay. I thought they announced it was 800. So
no. It will probably be 5. Is what I would bet.
Oh, okay. All right.
I said spending $500-ish on a console that you're gonna use for 5 or 6 years. And you're going to spend hundreds of hours on, like, it just seems like you should just get that cost out of the way because it's the depreciating cost. So I don't know. I always buy them on day one. I mean, you're going to play it, right? You're going to have it. You're eventually going to buy it.
I will buy it.
But I'm just going to buy it, get it out of the way. Then you have
it. Just get it. Then you're finished. Well, what I did was I always look for those deals, and with the PS4 with the PS4 in particular, when I bought that, I got it a year after it came out, and what was cool is they had GTA 5 for it, and I didn't play GTA 5 at that point. So I was like, cool, well, now I'll play it on the PS4. And that was fucking great. I love GTA 5.
I bought the launch PS4, but then I sold it to get the Spider-Man one.
Oh, there you go. Oh, man. That's awesome. Yeah, the Spider-Man one is tight.
Spider-Man PS4 is fantastic, by the way. That's a great game.
Dude, that was my jam right there. And here's the thing. I'm not sure that this Miles Morales game, they say it's its own thing, but it looks so much like the PS4 one. What's your take on this game?
So this is what it is. It's a 1.5, basically. So they're basically going to use the game engine and the method that the first game was designed and made, and they're going to run it through the new NVMe stuff. NVMe is a solid state technology, so that it loads faster, plays quicker, is functionally a better, more robust game for the PS5, and there'd probably be about a 20-hour story with Miles Morales and then a bunch of extra content. So it's basically like Spider-Man 1.5. It's not like an engine up rebuild that Spider-Man 2 will be. So I think it's definitely worth the cost, and it will be a full game, but it is not Spider-Man 2. And it's not like, it's basically like a half game, but not in terms of content.
Yeah, right. And there's a couple things that I have to worry about right now too, is the fact that I'm on unemployment currently, so I probably can't afford all this stuff. And I also think I definitely need a new TV,
people, so we can buy.
Yes, buy our damn books. But I need a new TV, obviously too. Yeah. So anyway, that's when I'm saving Ghost of Tsushima for, because I think it's going to drop in price by that point to like at least
a single player game. So $25, $30.
Yeah, probably. I think it'll be $39.99. That's my 30, 35, $39.99. That's where I could totally see it falling. And at that point, it's definitely going to be a game I pick up, because you're right. It is totally up there. It is something I want to play, like Onimusha.
Those are fun.
Oh man, those are fucking great. I love the second one in particular. That one was a lot of fun, and they were all good games. And it's a nice trip down memory lane with the that genre and everything. And
all the JRPG stuff is really kind of like creatively. I can't put it in like after the Gold Rush and stuff as much, but Puck the Artist is kind of where I get the.
I'm so excited to read Puck the Artist, man. I think that's and I saw it just from the video. So can you tell us a little bit about Puck the Artist?
Yeah, so I've co-created this with Garrett. He originally drew some of the like concept art of characters, but didn't really like have a story or know like what they did, like he just had this idea basically of people drawing stuff into the world and art styles having different like cultural and technological values and stuff, but I didn't really have the story. And I was like, he kind of like showed his stuff to me, and I just kind of started brainstorming, and I just had this idea, and we kind of like put it together. It was a really collaborative effort. This is really like definitely both of our creation. But Puck the Artist is a story about a world where everything that exists is drawn into existence, but color has been lost. But they don't know that. The people of the world don't know that there used to be color. So, like in this world, for example, like I'll show you a panel here. Like Puck, our titular hero, is drawing himself a birthday cake on his 16th birthday. So, and he draw himself a little mouse friend. Like, so everybody could hypothetically draw things into existence in this world, but not everybody does. Just like not everybody codes or can build a house. It's a skill. And so different cultures draw things in different ways. Like the elves are all like not watercolor because there's no color, but they're like water paint. Or the dwarfs are like all in charcoal and stuff. And the story's basically about our characters come in contact with color, as you might have suspected, and then they are kind of tasked with saving it. But like they're not the chosen kid, they're not really special, and they really shouldn't have to be the ones to deal with this. So it's kind of about these people having this kind of quest placed upon them when they're really not suited to deal with it, and people like expect them to be special, like expect them to be like a prophecy or something, but they have to kind of deal with the expectations of society for them to fix a problem that wasn't theirs to start with, and how they're actually going to fix it, or if they're going to fix it.
When I see this book, you know what I think of? Yeah, like just the first thing that just pops in my mind is Final Fantasy IX. Yeah, I don't know why. And it just I totally dig it. I think it's the coolest thing. And there's so many brilliant things you're doing there from a business standpoint, because you're bringing black and white into it, which is really cool. And black and white is in and of itself great, but you're gradually bringing color into the story, which I think is that's an amazing sign of progression in storytelling. I can't wait to see how you pull this off, and I have complete confidence in you.
Because the color has like certain metaphysical powers, basically, so it does things. So it's kind of fun when color snaps in. It's almost like Goku going Super Saiyan or something. It's like a very like visual, clear, like something's happening kind of moment. And so it's fun. And Garrett is fantastic. He always comes up with cool new designs for characters and monsters and shit. Sometimes too many cool monsters because I want to use them. I'm like, I can't just fit another fight in this But it's great. Basically, we kickstarted that a little while ago, and originally it was just going to be 66 pages because we had 32 done, and we finished the next 66. But as I was doing it, I didn't really like where the ending of the story was. I wanted it to be more punctuated. So we're probably going to release about 120 page book when we get it done. I plan on printing those at the same time I print the After the Gold Rush trade to save me on shipping costs, So when people be getting their Puck books from the Kickstarter, you'll be getting twice the book you paid for.
I can't wait. I'm not
charging people more for that. You just got to give me more time for us to finish.
Time
is the trade-off. But there'll be 3 volumes of this in the story, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's been really fun.
That's awesome. Miles, we're at the end of our block here.
Cool.
I want to give you a final chance to tell us where we can find you and do all that fun stuff. So go ahead, take it away.
Well, good. Yeah. So good thing about me is I'm the only Miles Greb in the world. So if you want to find my stuff, you can just Google my name. I'm just at Gold Rush Comic, or I'm just Miles Greb on Instagram, or I have Gold Rush Comics on Facebook. You can follow that. I have a Patreon if you want to check out my stuff, but don't want to order a bunch of books. You can just a couple bucks on Patreon, you can get access to all my comics. I have a CLOVIS, After the Gold Rush, Puck, and then my high fantasy series ESPERS that didn't take off super well, but issue 1's out, and I really like it. You can read that for free on there. You can check out my stuff, and we'll be kickstarting the full trade of After the Gold Rush on September 1st, and there's going to be a lot of cool rewards for that. So if you're new to the story, you can just get the trade and dig into it, or if you're a returning fan, you can get some cool perks and help us get that hardcover, because I really want to print a hardcover. I think that'd be awesome. But and if you don't like my books, that's fine. Go buy some other indie comics, because indie comics are a fantastic medium where people can be creative with visual storytelling, and we should always try to support and foster this community. Thanks for having me on, man.
Miles, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Do me a favor, hang out backstage. I'm going to close out the show. I just, want to have a few last words with you before we end the evening here. Yeah, thank you. What a great episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Ed Dukeshire, the guy who lettered marks for me right over here, my letterer on the book. He is watching the show. It is an honor to have you on watching the show. We should have you on here at some point, my friend. I'm sure you got a lot of stuff to tell us about in all your years of experience working in the field. Captain Radon, good to see you, sir. Now, guys, just so you know, I hope you don't feel if you're tuning in while we're live that I'm ignoring you, because I want to give my guests full attention. It's very important for me that they know that I'm listening to them so that I can ask them good, interesting questions to keep our conversation at a very high level, and that they get to say everything that is important to them. So thank you all for tuning in. If you do have questions for them, you can always post them in the comment section. I'm more than happy to relay them over to the creators, or the creators themselves can, answer the questions on in the comment section below. They're always welcome. It's always open. It's always free. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's your chance. If you're looking at that area, hit that subscribe button for me. And thank you all so much for tuning in. I will be back next Monday, or this Monday. We got Jim Kruger on for the 50th episode of the show. Jim has worked with Alex Ross. They did Justice together. He's done a bunch of stuff for Marvel, bunch of stuff for DC. Really talented writer, and I'm looking forward to chatting with him and getting to know him better. So I will see you guys next week with brand new episodes. And until that time comes, onward to victory.